Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina Rose, Director of Strategic Alliances at Foundation Source, and I will be facilitating today's webinar discussing productive partnerships with charitable clients. I'm pleased to be joined by Josh Stamer, Foundation Source's Senior Managing Director for California, who will be moderating today's discussion. He will be joined by our esteemed panelists, Sarah Silverio, Principal at Summit Trail Advisors, and Jan Vega, Director of Wealth Management at Aspiriant. I will introduce them in a few moments, but first wanted to touch base on a few points. For anyone not familiar with Foundation Source, we are the nation's largest provider of management solutions for private foundations. We empower people and companies to create a better world with their philanthropy through our suite of services, including administrative support, active compliance monitoring, tax and legal expertise, online foundation management tools, and philanthropic advisory services. We work in concert with financial advisors, attorneys and CPAs, consultants and family offices, individuals, families, and corporations to bring philanthropic visions to life. As we celebrate our 20th year of service, Foundation Source supports nearly 2,000 foundation clients of all sizes, who together have granted more than $7 billion to charities. Now, a quick word about Wi-Fi and phone connections. Probably like most of you, we are working remotely. We don't anticipate any technical issues during the broadcast, but if one of us loses connection, just know that we will quickly get it resolved and resume the webinar. If you experience problems, you can try exiting and then rejoining the broadcast. And you may also try audio via phone, sometimes better than on your computer. It will also reduce some strain on your Wi-Fi connection. Questions can be submitted at any time via the GoToWebinar dashboard on your screen. We will be leaving some time at the end of today's presentation to address your questions. If we do not have time to answer all of your questions, please know that we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Also, in the handout section of the dashboard, you can find a piece entitled Getting Started with Foundation Source for Wealth Advisors, which provides more information about private foundations and when it might be a good fit for clients. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Josh, Jan, and Sarah. Josh Stamer, as I said, is Senior Managing Director for the California region, where he works closely with private wealth managers, financial advisors, attorneys, and donors regarding their charitable goals. In his role, he draws upon his background in both client services and the financial sector. Josh previously served in sales management roles at Workiva and Maxwell Systems, Inc. At Workiva, Josh helped lead the company's entry into the West Coast financial services market, developing trusted partnerships with banks, insurance companies, and hedge fund organizations to support their clients. Josh holds a degree in business management from California State University, Long Beach, and the University of Wollongong in New South Wales, Australia. Jan Vega is Director of Wealth Management at Aspiriant in Los Angeles. She has over 20 years of experience within the financial services industry, serving high net worth individuals and families. She previously served as a family wealth advisor at Gent Spring Family Office, assisting families with financial and estate planning, tax, philanthropy, and family governance issues. Jan also served as a relationship manager at Wilmington Trust in their Los Angeles Family Wealth Group and is director for a single family office. She has a BA in Business Administration from Loyola Marymount University and an MBA from the University of Southern California with a concentration in finance and strategic consulting. Jan is a CFP and certified trust and financial advisor. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and 2 daughters. Sarah Silverio is Principal and Advisor at Summit Trail Advisors in New York City, overseeing all aspects of her clients' financial affairs. She has 13 years of experience working in wealth management and investments. Prior to Summit Trail, Sarah was a Senior Account Manager and Investment Committee member at Fisher & Co. She also served as a portfolio manager at JP Morgan Private Bank, overseeing discretionary client investment portfolios, and at BlackRock's Global Client and Portfolio Analytics Groups. Sarah has a BS in Finance and Accounting from Lehigh University and is a CFA charter holder. She lives in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Fort Greene. And with that, Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Christy. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you again. I'm happy to be with everyone and particularly excited about the diverse audience that we have joining today. Christy, as you mentioned, I have the pleasure of facilitating a conversation today between two incredible wealth advisors who I have a great amount of respect for. Jan and Sarah are both client-centric, collaborative, and truly passionate about their work. In my years of working in the wealth management community, I know that wealth advisors love to hear from talented peers like Jan and Sarah, so this should be a terrific session today. Before we get started, I thought it would be a great opportunity to review a little detail on why we chose our topic today, productive partnerships with charitable clients. At Foundation Source, as Christy mentioned, we have the pleasure of partnering with nearly 2,000 private foundations, which makes us the largest signer of private foundation tax returns in the country. This gives us a terrific lens to view the behavior of our clients as a subset of the charitable giving community. Let's look at the current marketplace on a couple of slides. So first and foremost, this slide shows us the trajectory of charitable giving in the US over the last 40 years. As you can see, in 2019, Americans gave nearly $450 billion to charity. So that's well over $1 billion every day going out of Americans' pockets and into those of charity, which is an incredibly impressive stat. The next slide, if you want to advance that, Christy. Perfect. So this shows us, well, most of the giving in the US is done via what we refer to as checkbook philanthropy, which is in essence Americans opening their wallets for specific causes and occasions. Private foundations followed by donor advised funds are the most prevalent and fastest growing charitable giving vehicles respectively. Over $1 billion are currently housed in private foundations, and total donor advised fund assets are rapidly approaching $150 billion. So this is a significant demographic in which our clients and their trusted advisors have when they're considering their giving options. Go ahead and advance, Christy. Perfect. So we know that people are motivated to give for many reasons. On the screen here, you're going to see a few of the more direct means that our clients list as far as motivations in their giving. Go ahead, Christy. And then on the next slide, we see that people are obviously very varied and diverse in their areas of passion. So when we think about different drivers for our clients and different causes and challenges that they like to increase impact around and deliver fulfillment on, these are some of the top items that our clients point to. And go ahead, Christy. Oh, there we go. Perfect. And finally, we definitely know that people, especially successful individuals, families, and corporations, need help. Studies show us that nearly 60% of the community feel that philanthropy should be discussed with a financial advisor within the first several meetings. In fact, roughly 30% feel it should come up in the very first meeting. On the other hand, only 45% are satisfied with the conversations that are currently taking place. This is precisely why we're talking with Sarah and Jan today. So Sarah and Jan, I'm going to invite you to both come off mute and we can go ahead and kick off our conversational portion of the webinar today. Thank you both for joining. It's a pleasure to be on with both of you.
Great, thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
You got it. So Jan, I'm going to start with you. You and I have worked together for a long time now. And I know you're particularly dedicated to having this conversation of philanthropic and charitable giving with your clients. Has philanthropy always been a part of the mix in your practice?
I've spent the majority of my wealth management career working with multi-generational families and family office type families who were concerned about their wealth being a positive influence on their children and those who benefit from it, and focused on how best to prepare them. So incorporating philanthropy was first introduced into my work as part of a best practice of a bigger family governance plan for successful wealth transfer to the next generation. And philanthropy is considered a best practice for family governance because it provides a unique platform to not only help families bond with each other, but also share family history and values. And so it also provides an opportunity for the rising generation to observe their parents and learn how they make financial decisions, and it provides a platform for them as well to practice making financial decisions themselves. So I've always observed that this value of incorporating philanthropy into a family's financial plan doesn't only just benefit multi-generational families. The concepts and values can be applied to really any individual and family at any level of philanthropic giving. And so for me, I enjoy helping families develop a mission around philanthropy because it touches on a personal reflection of their life history and values that we don't always get to hear about in the financial planning process. And it's a great way for them to connect their family history, financial, and personal values to their overall wealth.
Yeah, that's a terrific response, Jan. And you brought up so many different pieces that are a huge contributing factor to this conversation. You brought up family governance. You brought up a generational wealth transfer that we're seeing right now. It's no surprise that charitable giving and philanthropy are larger topics than they've ever been in the history of our country right now. So I can't wait to dig into a few of those points a little bit further with you today. So thank you again for being here. Sarah, so I've gotten to know you a little bit more recently, and in that time, it's absolutely apparent that this is an area of importance and focus for your practice as well. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in leading the conversation of philanthropy and charitable giving for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Philanthropy is one of the key components to being an outsourced family office. So in the first few meetings when we're talking about investments and trust and estate planning and insurance, philanthropy is one of those components. And when we bring it up with clients, you can ask questions like, are there charities that you've supported in the past that you'd like to continue to support, and open the door to get them talking. And I think it's important to really meet clients where they are in their philanthropic journey. So for example, you could have a client that says, yeah, I write a few checks a year, I give it to my accountant at year end. And then that's maybe a door to open talking about creating a charitable giving vehicle that can help them maximize impact and timing of those gifts. You could have other clients say, yeah, I have a donor advised fund, it works great, but there are XYZ limitations to it that I've noticed, and maybe that opens the door to a conversation about private foundations and the difference between the two. So I think really starting those conversations early, opening the door, and then hearing from clients where they are in their journey and how you can offer solutions.
Yeah, terrific. And just like Jan, Sarah, you brought up some terrific points. One of the things that I often lead with a lot of the advisors that I work with is around the concept of asking those right questions, right? Because as we talk about, there's really no wrong conversation when it comes, or wrong question when it comes to bringing this up. But I think a lot of times, some of the advisors that I think or that I work with almost overthink it, right? They assume that it has to be a conversation that's rooted in a question like, well, tell me your top 5 favorite charities to work with. A lot of times it's not a relatable question like that. So I've actually shifted my question asking to more things like, tell me some of the things on your bucket list, and tell me some of the things that you're passionate about, and how can we connect how that makes you feel with creating impact for those that you're looking to support. And I think it's a much easier concept of working with advisors and their trusted clients when we approach it from a little bit of a softer angle. Is that something that you see as well, Jan?
Yeah, I think it's brings out a lot of different angles. As I mentioned in the financial planning process, sometimes you don't get to dig into some of the personal level, and just by nature of talking about philanthropy being the fact that it's rooted, a lot of the giving tends to be rooted in their personal values and interests. It tends to bring out kind of different conversations that relate to a lot of angles of planning, like estate planning as well. And so it's interesting to kind of think about it that way.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sarah, do you see some of the questions that you're working in with the discussions with your clients? Some of the answers surprise you, right? When we're sitting in some of these family meetings, I know that I'm surprised all the time. So a lot of times the preconceived notions can lead us down different paths, and it's just an incredible way for us to get to know our clients a little bit on a deeper level, like you mentioned.
Yeah, agreed.
So,
It's a great way to really get to know your clients. Maybe one spouse that's maybe a little bit quieter in more traditional investment meetings, it comes alive when you talk about philanthropy. So I think it's a good way to connect with all family members.
perfect. So you talked a little bit about kind of how you got started in your journey on the wealth management side, and how that journey in wealth management ultimately led to your discussions around charitable giving with your clients. Tell me a little bit about how your approach has evolved over time as you've worked with more families, as you've gained more experience in doing that. I know for myself, starting off and having those conversations looks completely different than how I manage those conversations today. So tell me a little bit about the evolution of your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Our practice has evolved as our clients have evolved, and as their needs have changed, and how their wealth has accumulated personally, and it's really compelled them to want to give more. So when I think about our advice in philanthropy, I think about three different components. There's contribution. What assets do you contribute, in what size? That's evolved. I guess starting off with clients, it was identifying low basis shares of stock on an episodic basis. Now it's evolved to really helping our clients that want to maximize their philanthropic giving. They say to me, Sarah, I want to maximize my AGI contributions every year. So we're really, digging in and figuring out the most efficient way for them to accomplish their goals on how to contribute into the foundation or donor advised fund. The second component after contributions would be investments. Once those assets are gifted into a charitable vehicle, how do we invest that? Starting off, it was really a simple mix of mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and coming up with the right mix of assets to grow and assets to keep for near-term donations. As size has grown, that's evolved. So we now have separately managed accounts with ESG screens. We have private placement vehicles for impact investing to align the way our clients give with how they're investing in their portfolio. And finally, when it comes to actually giving the assets away, so how much do you want to give? Do you want to give the majority of the assets away during your lifetime, or do you want to pass on assets in the foundation to the next generation? Providing opportunities for clients to meet with like-minded donors, whether that's through a giving circle or in networking events that we've actually hosted for clients, has been a really great way to broaden our offering and bring clients together to talk about philanthropy and talk about charities that they're giving to and how they're thinking about giving. So it's evolved quite a bit since we've started working, and I expect it will continue to evolve.
That's terrific. So Jan, maybe the same question to you, right? You've had a terrific journey thus far in your career in wealth management, and I know just based on some of the meetings that we've done together and your experience with things like family governance and some of the areas that you really dig into at a terrific level with your clients. Talk a little bit about how your path has developed over time, and maybe some of the early conversations around charitable giving and philanthropy for maybe some of our younger advisors or our advisors who are earlier in their career and looking to kind of get started with that conversation, and then kind of ultimately where that's evolved to today.
Right, and yeah, over the years, I've worked with a lot of families who made decisions on charitable vehicles from an income and estate tax planning perspective. Mm-hmm. You've probably been in some of these conversations where, sometimes vehicle didn't ultimately match the goals of their philanthropy. So I found it valuable to break up the conversations with families around philanthropy into three main topics. And starting out with the first one, which is what is the vision and purpose of the philanthropy? I think reviewing with a family the benefits of coming together around philanthropy, and then learning about what resonates with the family and how they would like to define their philanthropic legacy could have an impact on the type of vehicle they ultimately use or choose. And so, like as an example, it could be that a family wants to make an impact in a specific cause, like a disease that may have had an impact on the family or a specific community. So that might lend more towards spending down of philanthropic assets, opposed to the goal of having a stream of assets that could pass down to the next generation and make a difference in each of the generation's lifetime. That might, kind of lean towards another type of vehicle. So having that conversation up front is kind of a good first step that I've found to have up front. And then the second one would be, working with families to create a philanthropic mission statement and taking kind of this vision of how they see their philanthropic legacy and then incorporating it into a mission statement and walking the family through an exercise around values, using a value survey, and then also doing a survey around best shared philanthropic areas of interest among the family. And then lastly, kind of thinking about how having a conversation among the family of measuring impact and what that means to them. I think each family defines success differently, and it seems to be more of a trend to want to, measure impact. And so some families focus on the quantitative, whereas others define more qualitative metrics or a combination of both.
That's really interesting. You brought up a couple of pieces that I think that I'd love to dig into a little bit further. You talked about one of the strategies that you employ is a value survey. Can you talk a little bit about how that comes about as part of your, your deep dive with families, and a little bit about what that value survey looks like?
Yeah, typically, especially when we're working with, oftentimes now we're working with families that are trying to incorporate the next generation. And so having the ability to have a tool to gather around, to share values and kind of not only identify maybe common values that have been shared values through, within the family, but also celebrate kind of individual values and hear stories around it. I find that that's a great exercise for families to go through. So oftentimes we're using resources like, there's a lot of firms that have value surveys. And so we've used a couple of them and bringing them into a family meeting where they can each individually take the survey on their own, and then bringing it to a bigger discussion around where some of their shared values are, and then being able to, have each individual express their own values is, I think, valuable for the whole family.
I absolutely agree. And I appreciate you sharing some of those strategies. So Sarah, when you think about some of the strategies that you employ with your clients, you brought up, which is something that's incredibly important for many of our clients, there's a mission to align investment vehicle with philanthropic goals, with many times family goals and long-term planning. What are some of the strategies that you use when you think about kind of both short-term planning and longer-term planning when it comes to both the investment, aligning your investments and impact investing, and some of the strategy you brought up as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're thinking about an asset allocation plan, it's important to understand how much the family plans to give away, because if they're planning on giving away a lot up front, you can't tie up a lot of money in private equity or longer term assets. So really getting that right mix is important. And I think, maybe even as recent as a couple years ago, people weren't too keen on impact in ESG investing because they thought they were giving up return potential. They would say to us, look, I want to maximize return in the investment portfolio so I can give the most away. I think that spread has narrowed. I think you're able to accomplish both strong investment performance and aligning your values with the investments that you make. So we do things like separately managed accounts of exclusionary screens. So whether it's equities or bonds, screening out issuers that are in industries that our clients' values don't align with. Let's say we have a climate-focused client, they would want to strip out oil and gas, big carbon emitters, other types of environmental factors that they would want to strip out of the portfolio. That's sort of a core component. And then we've really evolved now with impact investing, and not so much screening out, but really leaning in. So again, with a client that happens to be very climate focused, they're doing a lot of granting to organizations that support clean water and other environmental factors. We've made investments in renewable energy that are really interesting, in plant-based products, plant-based foods, things of that nature on the private investment side. And that's really created a lot of value for our clients.
That's terrific. And I've heard both of you ladies talk about the concept of impact, right? And impact is such a polarizing word in what we do because it can mean so many different things to so many different people. When you say something like measuring impact, that could mean one thing to one family and another to someone else. So when we think about this idea of measuring impact, one of the exercises that I like to take my clients through is really, and you touched on this a little bit, Jan, kind of the other side of impact, right? So if we think of impact as the stimulus that we and our grants and charitable activities put on something else, then really that other side of that coin, the other side of impact, is a word that I like to refer to as fulfillment, right? And how when I see our clients doing it best, they're able to not just achieve impact, but also achieve fulfillment. I almost look at it like if a client is so focused on creating impact and they make a grant, and that grant ultimately leads to 100 children going to college, or 100 kids going to college who ultimately wouldn't have been able to afford to go to college, that's terrific impact. But if the donor is not really passionate about education, then they might not realize a lot of fulfillment out of that gift. Conversely, they can give from the heart and make some gifts that really make them happy and make them feel good about themselves, that don't ultimately, from a measuring impact standpoint, create or generate a lot of measurable impact. So it is kind of that balancing act when we're having this conversation with our clients. And they're looking to their advisors for advice on how to find that balance many times. So I just thought it was interesting that you both brought up this concept of measuring impact, whether it's impact investments or impact in the work and the philanthropic side that they're doing. It's a very polarizing term in what we do and what we see every day. So shifting focus a little bit, Jan, just to go down a path that you had touched on briefly in your last response. With formalized charitable giving having a sharp upward trajectory and undoubtedly continuing to rise every day, given the wealth transfer that we've already touched on, increased entrepreneurship in the US, certainly the tax environment. There's a lot of options and different charitable vehicles available especially to affluent families. Where do you see private foundations specifically fitting into that practice? We certainly know there's donor advised funds and charitable trusts, and as mentioned before, kind of that concept of checkbook philanthropy. But when you're talking to your clients specifically about the vehicle, the private foundation, typically how is that conversation coming up? How are you landing on that as a vehicle? And what are some of the benefits that your clients realize in working through that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen families, choose foundations for, especially at a time when they plan to allocate a significant amount to philanthropy, but they might need the time and flexibility to define their long-term strategy, or they're still gauging interest in the next generation. So the flexibility of, that a private foundation provides in terms of being able to distribute into donor advised fund if they do change their mind. Whereas a donor advised, if a family sets up a donor advised fund, initially they can't transfer back to the foundation. So that's where I see families tend to kind of lean more towards the foundation route. I've also observed that families find it useful to have both the foundation and the donor advised fund. I've worked with a few families who have created a donor advised fund with a community foundation because the community foundation may provide a specific resource in helping them identify charities in the community they are interested in making that impact. And so they'll fund that using either the 5% minimum foundation distribution and work with the community foundation identifying organizations, or I've also seen funding of a donor advised fund in the same year, because with a concentrated stock position, they can maximize their charitable deduction with funding both the private foundation and the donor advised fund. The other areas I see foundations fitting in are providing opportunities for leadership and skill building for the rising generation who, parents, I've heard it several times now that parents are recognizing that the generations now, mostly millennials and Gen Y, are thinking about philanthropy different than, the generations before. And so they are recognizing the social awareness at early ages and want to use that passion and interest to engage them in the foundation. And then also, they think it provides good leadership skills and it's just a platform that provides, experiences that maybe another platform wouldn't. And then also, kind of to Sarah's point, is it has the flexibility to make impact, and socially responsible investments within foundation assets compared to other vehicles.
That's terrific. And before I'm gonna come back to a couple of the pieces that you mentioned, but before I do so, Sarah, anything to add in that same line of conversation, specific to the vehicle, the private foundation? Where are you seeing your clients have the most success in employing that?
Hey, I think our clients have started to think more strategically about their philanthropy as they're earmarking a majority of their wealth in their estate to transfer at their death. And I think they're more comfortable transferring it to a foundation where they're able to really have, a mission and governance in place to really create legacy and something to involve their children with as well. And I think there's more flexibility in private foundations when it comes to the types of assets you contribute, invest in, and then on the grant making side. I've also found the ability to hire staff has been helpful to our clients on their private foundations. And lastly, our clients they're really busy. They're in their careers and building their personal wealth. But at some point, a lot of our clients have expressed interest that when they're done with career number one, career number two is going to be in their private foundations, and it just gives a lot of meaning and legacy to their lives.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that I hear from our clients, certainly clients who have experience working with multiple charitable giving vehicles, is that the private foundation structure, you both mentioned the flexibility, you both sort of mentioned the control that you're able to have within a private foundation. But it's also that piece around more active philanthropy. Like you mentioned, Sarah, so many of our clients have their private foundation as their consideration for their quote unquote second career. Who are looking to shift more of their time toward their formalized philanthropy as they move along in their career or even in their life. But Jan, I wanted to jump back to something that you mentioned a moment ago, specific to being a terrific tool for family leadership. One of the most interesting studies that I've probably read over the last several years, it was put on by a very large law firm who did a very large survey across the demographic of their kind of quote unquote higher net worth clients. And the question was about what are the things that really keep you up at night, and what are the things that concern you most about your family and potentially being raised or working in a kind of a high net worth environment. The first piece, the first one that came to mind was long-term healthcare, which is probably no surprise, right? That's the top of mind for all of our clients. But really the second item, and this was above even things like holding the family together or divorce or separation of assets. Number two was very specific response, and it was that my children will lack the drive and ambition to be successful. And you touched on that, Jan. It's a very, very real concern for a lot of the people in the community that we work with, that specifically how their life has come to be. What are we teaching our kids? Are we bringing them up in an environment that's going to allow them to be successful? We don't want them sitting on the couch, so to speak, and we don't want them being one of those statistics on the wealth transfer that shows us that 3 generations in, most millionaires are going to not be, right? So how do you manage that conversation specific to kind of your experience with family governance, and how you help families create a collaborative, engaged environment through a vehicle like a private foundation?
I think there's been a lot of good case studies out there in terms of involving kids and having conversations earlier. And so a lot of parents I know are concerned around their kids knowing their wealth, early on. And I think philanthropy is kind of this easier way to introduce financial concepts and ideas than talking about, family, their specific personal wealth. So I think there's a lot of things that philanthropy has kind of evolved to over the years, probably through best practices of family governance. But even the experiential part of, being able to do family philanthropy together through the foundation, actually going to places that you're giving to and exposing, children specifically to other countries and maybe work that they've been giving to, or even locally, that they may not, to help set context of their wealth and, how their wealth has benefited them, but, also setting, maybe taking them out of their bubble a little bit of, what a lot of other people. So I know that families have expressed interest in that and doing more active hands-on philanthropy as well. So I think being able to think strategically from that level of how the types of values they want to instill in their kids from a personal level, and then using the foundation as a platform to incorporate some of those lessons, life lessons, has been a great, I think, in terms of being an advisor, being able to identify areas where they can instill or use the foundation as opportunities to build those skill sets is great.
Yeah, that's terrific, and I'm so glad you brought up experiential philanthropy. It's really a passion of mine personally, but I know as advisors to charitable clients, experiential philanthropy, I know has led to some of the most impactful conversations with clients, because you see your clients light up when they get to talk about being engaged with a particular charitable initiative, taking a trip somewhere, helping see the joy on their kids' faces or on their friends or family's faces when they get to really see some of the change that they're making. It's an incredible position to be in as a wealth advisor or as another advisor to the family when that happens. Sarah, maybe talk a little bit about some of the experiences that you've had, kind of in that same vein, if we stay on the topic of family engagement. Some of the conversations or some of the experiences that you've seen in your clients and how that's affected you, and how you've been able to share that and hopefully grow that with your other clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of our clients are first generation wealth, so we're now helping them think about G1 to G2. And one really interesting thing that came up recently was one of our clients decided they wanted to get their children more involved in their foundation. So they sat down, they had a family meeting, talked about shared values, goals, mission for the foundation, which was a great conversation for them to have. Subsequent to that, they asked their children to pick a charity. They had 2 children, both picked a charity that they wanted to make a grant to. And I saw one of the grant requests come in, and it happened to be a local soup kitchen in New York City where we at Summit Trail volunteer. So I thought, this could be a great opportunity to have our client, to invite our client's son to volunteer with us. COVID unfortunately got in the way, but our client was delighted at that idea and thought it would be great for, not only for their child to understand the concept of philanthropy, but to actually physically live it, to be there, to see the folks that it's benefiting, and really sort of round out the experience. So I look forward to being able to do that hopefully in the very near future.
I think we're all looking forward to a little bit more of that in-person engagement, that's for sure. But thank you for sharing that story. Storytelling and engaging our families in that method is so powerful. Jan, maybe if you wanted to also share an experience, just because I know, like I mentioned before, the advisors on our webinar today absolutely love hearing ideas and how they could potentially better engage with some of their families. But maybe just share a quick case study of a client that you've worked with that's made an impact either across their family, their foundation, or even you as their trusted advisor. I know that they would love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been covering this a little bit, but it seems that there's this greater trend of seeing more families give more towards their philanthropy bucket than in years past. I think I'm seeing families carve out more, like a specific defined amount to their children, and then committing more to charity. And then with the growth in the market over the years, it just seems like these amounts are ending up being significant. So I had worked with a family who had committed to give 50% of their net worth to philanthropy. And when we started working with them, and now their net worth is over 10 times what it was when we started working with them. And so I've just found that, incorporating philanthropy into the agenda, into 2 meetings a year, actually works really well for us in terms of our connection with families, with the family. And it's, one meeting's focused on reviewing the impact of their gifts. And then the second meeting is kind of a strategy meeting, kind of more cash flow focused. What are the grants coming up in the next 3 years? Starting to look at new grants, and then, just looking ahead and helping them strategize on what they need to do kind of to meet their target amount that they've identified they wanted to give over the next few years.
That's terrific. That's terrific. I know that anytime we can help our clients be more results oriented in their approach, it typically ends up in a better place for them. They're going to participate more in philanthropy. They're going to be more willing to have those engaging conversations with their family members and so forth. So I do want to be mindful of time. I know that we want to leave some time here at the end for some questions from our audience, which I know that several have come in. So maybe just a couple of more questions for the two of you ladies before we jump into some questions. I know that one thing that's a little bit different, obviously, this year than any year in the past has been the impact of the pandemic and COVID, which hopefully we're making terrific strides in, but I know that it's still certainly affecting the ability to get together with our families, with our clients in the manner that we have been used to in the past. So, Mira, starting with you, tell me a little bit about how kind of going through 2020 and now into 2021, how the pandemic and some of the other issues that we've faced as a country have impacted your clients specific to their charitable giving and their approach in philanthropy. Have you seen an uptick in certain areas, and have you seen the downturn in others? But tell me a little bit about kind of what this last year has kind of led to for some of your families.
Yeah, so for me, in last March, when COVID was really at its, in New York City, it was really rough. And a lot of our clients reached out, how can I help? How can I help? And we were able to help pull together a list of lots of different organizations, whether that was to get PPE or aid to hospitals or childcare for healthcare workers, all sorts of different ways to pitch in at this really collective moment in our society when we all sort of banded together to help one another and try to be as humane as possible. And we were able to work with our clients to get out a lot of checks, a lot of grants during that time, which was great and really, really impactful. And then I think since then, I agree with Jan that our clients are giving more. Our clients are they're philanthropic, and it's becoming more and more of a focus for them. And the types of charities that they're giving to, I have seen sort of change with the times. So you have more donations going towards racial justice issues, gender equality, things that you hear about, sort of in the media and the news and different events that have sort of spurred donations. I am seeing a lot of that with our clients.
That's terrific. Jan, same question for you. Tell me a little bit about kind of the last year and where you've seen some of the change or uptick and so on.
Yeah, I've observed similar things that Sarah mentioned. The other thing I would just add is that, in terms of meeting virtually, I've noticed that families, have been doing that. And it actually, as much as we all don't like to, are hoping Zoom goes away, or these video conferences go away, I do think there's an efficiency and practicality around it that is going to work for families going forward in terms of meeting more regularly. And I think the ability to be able to use these platforms to connect family members that aren't geographically together is going to be beneficial. So I think that's maybe a plus side. The positive side of last year is I do think there's, we found other ways to do things that might actually, be practical in the long term.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It certainly taught us what we're capable of, right? I think in that same thread, what we've seen here at Foundation Source is an incredible uptick on things that I think most people don't think of when they immediately think of charitable giving and philanthropy. We've certainly seen a steady departure away from clients who have always only focused on standard grant making, right? They're becoming a little bit more entrepreneurial in their approach. Maybe they've moved toward things like scholarship programs or grants directly to individuals, or research grants, or prize-based philanthropy. And they're really taking this opportunity to explore some of those out-of-the-box opportunities in philanthropy that I know make people like us really excited, right? I had a client who just finished up producing a documentary film as a result of as a mission of their family foundation, and leveraging expenses alongside grant making dollars to do that. I don't think that they would have ever explored doing that if it weren't given the pandemic, and maybe a little bit more time they've had to focus on where they could make an impact that was both going to generate fulfillment for them personally, but also create some terrific impact outward. So I think you're right. We certainly have seen this as a lens for people to take a little bit of a different approach sometimes, which is terrific. So maybe Kirsty, before we move on to your initial questions, I'll go to you, Sarah, first, just before we jump into questions. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with today as you kind of think through recapping some of the discussion points today, as you think about, if you could give a nugget of advice to yourself 7-10 years ago, as you were maybe starting off more of your journey, a pointer, just something to leave people with, what would that be?
Yeah, I think really don't shy away from talking about philanthropy with clients. There's a lot of different ways that you can add value. There's just a lot to do. There's a lot of things that clients may not be aware of that are available to them. So I think just bring up the topic, and don't be shy. And it gives you a way to really connect on such a human level, on a deeper level, and talk about shared values, and talk about how they're going to talk about money with their children and next generation planning. And it's been great. It's been great for our business, and I've really enjoyed that way of connecting with clients.
Yeah, I don't know if you did it on purpose, Sarah, but you really brought us back to that last slide, right? Just have the conversation. The clients want you to bring it up. They're expecting you to bring it up. There's really not a lot of wrong ways to do that. Heck, it's not another conversation related to the stock market performance for the day, right? So at least we can get out of the norm a lot of times with our clients. But the studies do show that clients are craving that conversation. They're waiting for you as their trusted advisor to bring it up, and I appreciate you taking the sentiment of not shying away from that. So thank you. Jan, same question. If you were to have kind of a takeaway that people could write down, maybe as a strategy or a final thought to our session today, what would that be?
Yeah, I agree. And this is one of my favorite areas of planning for families. And I think the important part is, identifying where your line is in the area of philanthropy that you want to fulfill as, in your role. And then identifying the right partners, for all the other. I mean, from my perspective, there's the administrative compliance piece, there's the strategic consulting, and forming the foundation governance, and then identifying the organizations to give to, and then measuring impact. That's kind of how, in my mind, I frame up the different areas of expertise, and kind of figuring out where you fit in the process. But to Sarah's point too earlier, is coordinating the roadmap, or creating the roadmap and filling in the partners, is just as valuable as doing it yourself. So I think, Josh, you probably get an email from me 2 to 3 times a month, asking for white papers and things like that, and finding the right partners to fill in the expertise is just as valuable as, doing it yourself.
Yeah, that's terrific. I really appreciate that, Jan, and you're right. We can never have too much information to kind of deliver to our clients. It's being on the ready with a response, with a well thought out talk track for our clients is sometimes the best thing that we can provide. I'll just close us up here in our discussion with maybe answering my own question a little bit, and leave the audience with a bit of a takeaway as well. And for me, that would be, as trusted advisors to our clients, we can never discount the differentiator that philanthropy and charitable giving can be with our clients for their business. We particularly have the privilege of working with families that have incredible amounts of wealth, and they've been very successful. However, we also see clients that have hundreds of thousands of dollars go up and down in the stock market every single day. But I'll show you that same client that lost $200,000 because the stock market took a dip, and they made a $50,000 grant to one of their favorite organizations that didn't have the impact that they thought it would. And that $50,000 is the one that they sit there and lose sleep over, right? It's not the $500,000 that went down in the stock market. So philanthropy does have a different level of heartstrings when it comes to our clients. There's a different level of passion. It engages responses like family and impact and fulfillment that many other components of our lives don't. So it's very powerful, and it can be an absolutely terrific window into building stronger partnerships with our clients. So, Christy, I think we did okay on time. You haven't thrown anything at the screen on us yet, but I did want to, as promised, make sure that we managed our time okay to make sure we left some time for some questions from the audience here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation. And I always know when it's a good discussion based on the questions, and we have quite a few that have come through. So I will say at the outset, we're not going to have time to get to everything, but we'll do our best to work through this. So it's interesting. There's a mix of very kind of tactical questions with more, approach and how you address some of these. And so I'll start with kind of that piece, some of the softer skills. And there was a question that came through that said, what's the hardest lesson you've learned while working with clients on their philanthropy? And what advice would you give to other advisors who may be facing similar situations, or maybe kind of feeling a little daunted with starting to incorporate this in their practice?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I know as I think that through, and I'll certainly turn it over to the ladies here in a second, but when I think through some of the challenges, I think that the biggest challenge is that there's no guidebook, right? There's no uniform response to a lot of what we see. We kind of have this cheesy expression in the private foundation space where we say, if you've seen one private foundation, you've seen one private foundation. But it really does come down to that. We know that that families are about as diverse as it gets, and sometimes we want to kind of put our client demographic into a box the best that we can. But just because, like Sarah, like you mentioned, just because we tend to work with more, first generation wealth doesn't make necessarily one family just like the other. So sometimes for me, it's taking those experiences and making sure that we're applying the right resources to the right questions that our families are asking, because families are going through different things. Some individuals have a different approach with their investments than they do the next. So it really does come down to asking as many questions as you possibly can, getting as much research done as you possibly can, like Jan mentioned, providing those clients with the best resources that you can, and then hoping that some of that framework sticks for them. So that's what I would say. I don't know, Sarah or Jan, if either of you'd like to jump in on that as well.
I could jump in and just say, I think the probably most intimidating part for most people in terms of facilitating a conversation or leading a conversation with multiple family members is the family dynamics piece, which I think, could be challenging when you're talking about issues that where maybe the family members don't all agree. And I think that's definitely a piece that you have to be comfortable in kind of leading the conversation around that, and in a way that there could be conflicts. So I think that's an area that some people prefer to engage other third-party researchers that do it every day, and that makes a lot of sense. And then some people, depending on how they know the family and how comfortable they are, can feel they can lead it themselves.
Yeah, I'd say one challenge is I think philanthropy can be overwhelming because clients feel this huge responsibility to fix so many things wrong with, or they perceive to be wrong with the world. So I think really helping to sort of guide clients on, to Jan, what you spoke about earlier, talking about their values and kind of drilling down into sort of this broad reaching topic into how you're actually going to give dollars away is challenging. And I think really the more you can engage philanthropic consultants and other experts with your clients to make it less overwhelming, the better, because then they'll engage more and not be so intimidated by it.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think that that sentiment is reflective on the advisor as well, right? Sometimes it's not just the client feeling overwhelmed in their responsibility. It's many times it's us as advisors who want to make sure that we're not passing on information that's not helpful, or that we're not being overwhelmed. And we hear terms like community foundation and impact investing and entrepreneurial philanthropy and venture philanthropy, and we feel like we have to be experts in all of those for all of our clients all the time. But you both said it, right? Like build your team of resources. Bring in people like me, and bring in other resources. Bring in your tax partners. Get a team around having that answer, and really don't feel like you have to be the one delivering that answer all the time.
Great. Thank you all. I thought that was something actually that I thought of when you were talking about the values survey and what happens when they don't agree. So I'm glad that you addressed that, and it's partially, utilize the other advisors to build the team. There were some questions that I'll just address very quickly. Yes, this is being recorded, and yes, you will receive an email tomorrow with both the slides and the recording. As you can see, it was mostly a conversation, but there were some good stats in the slides. We want to make sure you have them. There was also a question that came through on how to reach the presenters, and I don't want to inundate Sarah or Jan with emails or calls, so I would just ask for you to email me at crose@foundationsource.com, and I will connect you to whichever presenter you want to have a conversation with. So I think we have time for one tactile question, and I know this is one that advisors are very concerned about on behalf of their clients, and that is, so notwithstanding a client's innate altruism, what strategies do you use to replace the dollars given away? I'm sure that's for the benefit of the next generation. So, how do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, I think I can frame it for us, Christy, and I'll go back to something I said before, right? The largest private foundation in the country has a sunset plan in place, and they've grown for a long time. But ultimately, their goal is to spend that entire corpus down over a predetermined period over the next couple of decades, or couple of years anyway. So it is a little bit different for everyone. Some of our clients that we see stick very strict to the 5% minimum distribution requirement, and then try to grow it a little bit every year to maintain that corpus. Others are okay going above and beyond that 5% distribution requirement on a private foundation, and then maybe pull back in a year or two ahead, given the market conditions and so on and so forth. So it really does tend to be a more individual decision. But great question for Jan and Sarah. How do you see some of the private foundations that you're working with make sure that they're keeping the investments at a level where they can continue on in perpetuity if that's their goal?
Right, and I think you mentioned it, Josh, where you have some clients that are looking to give the 5% away a year, which is a reasonable return target to keep the foundation in perpetuity. But there are other clients that want to give away a lot more, and I think financial modeling is a helpful tool. Obviously, it's only illustrative, but you can help clients say, here's your grant budget, here are the return expectations for the foundation, here's what it'll look like, in various simulations over the next 20 years.
Yeah, and on a similar point, I think we've had families that, have wanted to give to a specific cause based on what's going on, and then kind of modeling it out. And, the idea of perpetuity versus sunset, it seems to be coming up more often these days in terms of, families thinking about how, and that's where kind of going back to the purpose of the philanthropy and getting everyone on the same page of, what is the goal of the philanthropy that helps to drive, some of it as well. But yeah, I do think it's an area that it's helpful to get consensus, even if it's just for, the group that's a specific, you define when you're going to revisit it. It's like, right now we want to focus on this, but we know that in the next few years we want to revisit it, and we might change our minds on it. But getting the consensus to, which way that they're leaning is good up front.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Jan, right? Things change, right? You can go into it with a very straightforward plan, and then you're presented with a program-related investment that you get so excited about, and one of your clients really wants to jump into with both feet, and it changes their model a little bit. The market changes the model a little bit. We've seen an incredible amount of growth across the board, for the most part, with private foundations due to the high performing market, and that has also kind of changed the way that people are approaching what they're doing. Sarah, you brought it up earlier in working with a client who has a 7x wealth platform that they did when you first started working with them. So guess what? That changes your approach with not just investing, but private foundations activities as well. So I think that there's a lot to consider there, but it's a terrific question, Christy.
Yeah. And, I would also say if you're concerned about replacing dollars that have been put into a private foundation, or you're thinking about inheritance, looking at insurance strategies for a private foundation are helpful. And I know there were questions we didn't get to today on donor advised funds and how they can work together with a private foundation, on grants to individuals programs. We have white papers on all of these pieces, so you can always go to foundationsource.com and find those resources there. We will also be following up with you to make sure that we've answered your questions. So I want to just thank you so very much, Sarah, Jan, and Josh, for this really enlightening conversation today, and really appreciate your time. Like I said, everyone will receive a copy of the recording, and if you have questions, you can email info@foundationsource.com. Our main phone number is 800-839-0054, and you can also email me directly, crose@foundationsource.com. And with that, concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.